The antagonist of a story is actually a pretty interesting thing from a writing point of view. They can come in all different shapes and sizes, from physical powerhouses to calculating intellectuals, from honourable warriors to evil murderers. But whatever form they take, they all serve the same basic purpose. They're an obstacle for the protagonist to overcome, something that can challenge them to become better and stronger than they were before. They're basically the driving force behind the hero's journey. But it's more than just that. A good villain can challenge the very nature of who and what a hero is, and what the audience believes them to be. They can have justifiable motivations and complex personalities all of their own. The best ones can even make the audience question just who exactly the real villain is. In fact, the villains are often cooler and more memorable than the hero themselves. Why? Because unlike the hero, writers don't have to worry about making their villains likeable and relatable, so they can afford to take risks with them. They can indulge their wildest writing fantasies, creating the most despicable psychopaths, terrifying monsters, evil dictators, or cunning criminals imaginable. The more evil they are, the bigger the threat they pose, or the harder they test the protagonist, the more satisfying it is when the hero finally prevails. The problem is that good villains seem to be a dying breed these days. The awesome antagonists that used to dominate the screen and push our heroes to the very limits of their endurance are gradually being replaced by weak, flaccid, forgettable imitations with none of the power and menace of their predecessors. And because they no longer present a challenge, there's no real payoff when they get defeated. Now, explaining how and why this is happening is going to take a bit of time, so strap in and prepare yourself for the Drinker's Writing Workshop. The point I'm making here is that all of these characters make for shitty villains, either because they lack the self-control, fighting ability, intelligence, or sheer physical strength to be genuinely intimidating. They never present a tangible threat to the hero. In fact, they're basically treated as weak, pathetic strawmen that can be easily brushed aside once the script decides it's time for them to lose. The writers in this case lack the one thing that every creator should have for their antagonist, and that's respect for their creations. Darth Vader, Hans Gruber, Hannibal Lecter, the Terminator, the list goes on, but the thing that ties all these characters together is respect. The writers were smart enough to build their antagonists up, so they became a genuine threat for the hero to overcome, instead of trying to break them down and belittle them right from the beginning. Now, the thing you might rightly be wondering is why? Why is this happening? What exactly has changed? Well, quite a bit as it happens. See, the real problem here is that there are pretty strict rules around what you can and can't show in mainstream movies. And I'm not talking about boobs and violence like in the old days, I'm talking about the unwritten rules behind the scenes that basically exist to make sure their movies don't incur the wrath of journalists, the news media, or the endless Twitter mobs just waiting for the next thing to get offended about. In this case, one of the golden rules is that women are never allowed to lose to men at anything for any reason. Whether it's a physical fight, a test of skill or intelligence, or even a simple argument. Pick basically any scenario where a woman gets pitted against a man, and I can pretty much guarantee you the woman will come out on top. She'll either outsmart the man in a battle of wits, or get the last word in an argument, or kick his ass in a fight regardless of their relative size and strength. Whatever it might be, the rules dictate that no man can beat a woman in a balanced engagement, because the natural implication would be that men are smarter, or stronger, or generally better than women, and we certainly can't have that. Now this is all well and good, but it creates a very obvious problem when your hero happens to be female and your villain male. Traditional storytelling requires the antagonist to start out stronger and more dangerous than the hero, forcing them to grow and improve themselves in some way before finally prevailing at the end. But naturally, this process requires the man to be dominant in the early stages, and as we've already discussed, that's not allowed to happen anymore, even if it's just a temporary thing. So how exactly do you get around it? Well, if you happen to write for Disney, Marvel, DC, or Lucasfilm, you don't. Instead, you're forced to make your villains weak and pathetic, either unfairly elevated beyond their abilities, or jealous and envious of the hero's success. It's basically a form of projection, allowing the writers to vent their frustrations about imagined enemies and rivals onto a weak strawman that can be easily swept aside by an all-conquering heroine. Unfortunately, this whole mindset creates more problems than it solves. Weak villains make for weak stories because they rob the narrative of its tension and drama. Even worse, it actually undermines the hero themselves, because if they're never really tested by a worthy opponent, then they haven't really achieved anything. A hero is only ever as strong as the villain they defeat. And what's really interesting is that the problem still exists even if you reverse the roles. Just a little something to think about there. The point I'm making is that the reason people didn't warm to characters like Rey or Captain Marvel isn't because of their gender, it's because everything's made so fucking easy for them that it's basically impossible to feel any empathy. It's the same exact problem with Ghostbusters, or Harley Quinn, or Charlie's Angels. If your heroes do nothing but plough their way through a collection of unthreatening, neutered enemies, then you'll never get your audience to care about their struggle, because they don't fucking have one. So what exactly is the solution here? Well, ironically enough, the solution is equality. And I mean real equality, not the bullshit Hollywood version that makes one side artificially weaker just to make the other look superficially strong. If you want your female heroes to be respected equally, then you have to put them through equal struggles against worthy enemies. You need to stop nerfing your villains in a vain attempt to avoid offending people on social media, because honestly, the more you try to appease them, the more you compromise your ability to tell a decent fucking story. If you want kick-ass heroes that people can look up to, then you need to give them kick-ass antagonists they can be afraid of. In short, you need to give your villains their fucking balls back. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now.